Welcome back to the second part of our session on the GreenRisk4ALPs project and on the outputs of the project. We had a very lively discussion already in the first part, so thank you very much for putting your questions in the chat and engaging with the speakers. Next, we have a presentation also from Eurac Research from Silvia Cocuccioni, who is a junior researcher at the Eurac Research Center in Bolzano, working at the Earth Observation Institute Climate and Disaster Risk Group, and at the Science and Policy Interface in the fields of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. She's focusing on risk assessment and risk governance, and was leading the work package 3 of the GreenRisk4ALPs project and the development of the Rapid Risk Appraisal method, which she will present to us now.
Good morning, everyone. I am Silvia Cocuccioni, a researcher from Eurac Research, and my presentation today is about the Rapid Risk Appraisal, a participatory approach to analyze risk management practices. The Rapid Risk Appraisal approach was developed and applied within GreenRisk4ALPs. With this presentation, I will walk you through the methodology. So first of all, explaining you what we mean with the risk concept, and then going through the objectives and the methodology, so how it works, then presenting you a brief example of results and also some applications beyond the project GreenRisk4ALPs. So a brief explanation on what we mean with the risk concept was already presented by my colleague Katrin briefly in the previous presentation. So risk results from the interaction of the natural and the social systems. So a natural hazard by itself does not constitute a potential risk, but this occurs only when some assets or people are present. So what are the objectives of the Rapid Risk Appraisal methodology? Well, the goal of the approach is to analyze and compare all the different risk management practices which are in place to address the different risks in each of the study areas, particularly those connected to gravity-driven natural hazards, such as landslide, rockfall, or avalanches. In particular, first of all, the objective is to get a first insight on the study area, and then to identify the strengths and points for improvement regarding the risk management practices, instruments, and tools available. Understanding how the risk management works in the present helps to better define the risk management strategies for the future. So how does the Rapid Risk Appraisal approach work? What is the methodology behind it? It's a participatory process, so a 3-hour workshop. As you saw in the video presenting work package 3, this is one of the 3 methodology presented there, so the one dealing with expert involvement and participation. So during the Rapid Risk Appraisal workshops, we invited 5 to 15 experts belonging to different departments dealing with risk management. So these experts are not only dealing with different natural hazards, so for example, some with rockfall, some with avalanches and so on, but also their expertise covers different steps of the integrated risk management cycle. So some are dealing with more theory-based activities, such as risk assessment. Others are more practice-oriented, so the ones really dealing with the emergency phase, so with the response or recovery. The Rapid Risk Appraisal methodology is based on the ISO 31000 risk management norm, which includes 3 steps. The first step is the identification step, which involves the selection of the most relevant natural hazards from a risk perspective. So those hazards which have the potential to cause the most damage and loss in the study area. The selection of 2 natural hazards is based on a common discussion among all the participants using the available maps and data. The second step is the analysis step, which makes use of 23 indicators or questions following the risk management cycle. So investigating all the risk management practices, covering all the steps of the risk management cycle. So the 23 indicators are grouped in 8 different categories that you can see here in the yellow box. The first category is hazard and risk assessment, which looks into the data on past events and hazard risk maps available. Then there is land use planning, which analyzes the presence of land use planning tools and natural hazard regulations. Then the third category and fourth is the man-made and the nature-based solutions. So both looking at the plans and data available regarding technical and green measures, in particular protective forests. Then we have risk communication, which analyzes how the public is informed on potential risks, specifically looking at the quality and at the inclusiveness of risk communication activities. Then we have early warning, as well as response and recovery, which looks at the plan and resources available in these fields. So thanks to the use of the 23 indicators, the rapid risk appraisal is a systematic approach which can be replicated in a similar way in all the different study areas. For each indicator or question, not only is the full answer recorded, but also the experts have to decide upon one among three different scenarios, reflecting their satisfaction on that available tool represented by each indicator. Here is an example. So the question is a database of past natural hazard events available? So the experts have first to describe how past natural hazard events are recorded in each study area, and then describe how satisfied they are with the available data in the study area, selecting one of these scenarios. So scenario 1 represents the best practice, where there is a high expert satisfaction. Scenario 2 is the average case, when improvement is desirable. And scenario 3 is when some points are missing. So the improvement is not only expected, but is really necessary, according to the expert invited, since there is a low expert satisfaction. To each of the available scenarios, some points are assigned. So more points are assigned in case of the best practice scenarios, and less points are assigned in case of the third scenario, so the points missing scenario. All the points are recorded on an Excel sheet, and these points are used to generate the rapid risk appraisal profile. So it's this spider chart, which you can see in the bottom right, and it's part of the third step of the rapid risk appraisal, which is the evaluation step. It's important to underline that the points assigned, and therefore the risk management profile, give a presentation of the expert perception on the risk management practices, and not an objective description of how these practices work. Thanks to the risk management profile, it is possible to compare not only different natural hazards, but also different parts. So throughout the GreenRisk4ALPs project, 4 different rapid risk appraisal workshops were organized in these 4 different study areas that you can see listed here on this slide. So here you can see the workshop details. So some workshops were held in person, others were held online, and in total 4 to 8 different departments were invited to each of the workshops. And here you can also see the natural hazard selected during the identification steps. So debris flows were addressed in all the study areas, while rockfall or avalanches were selected in different study areas. In this slide, you can see the 4 different risk management profiles generated through the rapid risk appraisal in the 4 different study areas analyzed. So the bigger the polygon, the more the experts identified the different risk management practices as best practices. The more the points are towards the inner side of the spider chart, the more the points of improvements that were identified by the experts for each risk management practice. For example, you can see that hazard and risk assessments were fully considered as best practices in both the parts of Val Ferret and Southern Wipptal. On the other hand, for example, risk communication was perceived as potential point for improvement in all the different study areas, as you can see in the 4 graphs. Now I will give you a brief presentation on some example of results, only regarding partially the hazard and risk assessment category and the risk communication category due to time restrictions. So for the category hazard and risk assessment, a database of past natural hazard events was actually available in all the studied parts for all the considered natural hazards. Although a database was available in all the pairs, the expert satisfaction differed from pair to pair. Moreover, the characteristics of each database differed from pair to pair. For example, in Val Ferret and in Southern Wipptal, the data on past natural hazard events was collected systematically, and the historical events are digitalized, and there is spatial explicit information as well as descriptive information for each event, and all of this is available and accessible online. Therefore, the experts were really satisfied with the quality of such data, identifying it as a best practice with limited points for improvement. On the other hand, in Oberammergau, the points for improvement identified by the experts were more. As for example, for rockfall, the data on past events was judged not as systematic as the one for other hazards. And in Kranjska Gora, for example, the data is collected by different departments and it's focusing on damage-causing events only. Showing you another example of results, this time for the risk communication category. This was perceived as a point for improvement in all the pairs, where improvements are possible according to all the experts, especially in peace times, for example, through school education, and for specific natural hazards in particular, for example, rockfall, landslide, and then before more compared to avalanches. Nevertheless, some good practices are present. For example, an SMS alert system is present in Val Ferret, or regarding the inclusiveness of the risk communication activities, the avalanche report in Southern Wipptal is available in 7 different languages. So within the project GreenRisk4ALPs, the rapid risk appraisal approach was combined with other methodologies presented both in the video and in previous presentations, such as the spatial explicit assessment, and with the FAT tool, the economic evaluation of measures. So by combining these 3 different types of approaches, more informed decisions and risk management can be taken for the future. So thanks to the project, ecosystem-based solutions, so in this case, protective forests, can be better included in risk management practices in the future. So the rapid risk appraisal approach was also already applied beyond the GreenRisk4ALP project by PlanAlp, the platform for natural hazards of the Alpine Convention, where the methodology was adapted and applied in all the Alpine Convention member countries. If you are interested in the results or if you want more details on the methodology, please consult the project deliverables, especially those of Work Package 3 and the Forest Handbook Volume 1, which will be soon available. I thank you for your attention and I look forward to the discussion during the conference. And in case of questions, here you can find my email.
It's nice that you are here with us, also in Innsbruck. I have a question regarding the stakeholder feedback, because we identified yesterday how important it is to involve the stakeholders in such a process. What's the feedback of the stakeholders regarding the rapid risk appraisal? Did they learn a lot as well themselves during the process? And what's your impression?
Hello, thank you for the question, Anne. Well, first of all, I think one of the first feedbacks we received from the experts was that they were really interested in comparing their practices with the other parts, with the other study areas, and that was actually one of the goals of the rapid risk appraisal, so to really get to know what the other really countries or regions are working on and what they're doing. So because often what was considered as a best practice in one place was not in another according really to the single expert. And I think that's another point that was underlined, that really the results, the expert really wanted to make sure that the results I mean, the data they corresponded to only to their opinion and not to the entire department or to the entire region, because the rapid risk appraisal is really much dependent on invited experts, of course. So that's another point the expert really pushed and underlined. But I think, yes, the main feedback was that they were interested in comparing and seeing what the others are working on and how, for example, the profile looked like in other areas.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm curious, in your spider diagrams, we could see that nature-based solution ranked always very high. That's correct, right?
Yes.
So everything is fine.
No, that's a really good question, actually. I mean, it could be also because many of the invited experts belonged really to that field. So they really, not that we're more aware, but they were really pushing forward their activities. But of course, points for improvement were identified, even if they were considered as best practices. For example, in Kranjska Gora, where the maps for natural hazard or risk were not fully available. There, of course, maybe the experts said, okay, maybe we can integrate that once these are available, so the protective forests in the future maps. And and of course, for example, the protective forest maps, they were said not to be updated in every after every damage causing event in all the parts. So all the experts said, okay, they are available, but they could be updated more frequently after a damage causing event. So of course the indicator scored high, but it's possible to do better anyhow, and I think GreenRisk4ALPs results can help also in that direction.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, because this was my next question. So kind of what was the feedback like directly, but that was a really good example, that especially also the maps and like developing more dynamic approaches, or where we can react faster to changes in the forest cover, and rerunning simulations and calculating or modeling forest effects and how this changes. This is really something for the future, and this was also identified by your method. But so it's also that you said, yeah, maybe some experts were not from that field and maybe they didn't know. So it's also very important to select the stakeholders, right? And how, like, what is your recommendation if I would like to do that in my region, if I would like to perform a rapid risk appraisal? How do I select the stakeholders?
Well, first of all, by carrying out a stakeholder analysis, so trying to understand who is responsible for what, not only for one natural hazard, but for more natural hazards. For example, different departments of the same, for example, of the province or of even the municipality can be responsible for different natural hazards. For example, the geology for the geology offices for landslides, while torrent and avalanche control for avalanches. So it's really important to look for who is responsible for what, having maybe some local partners that can help you. So if you're not from the area, to have someone to really explain you how the situation works there, and carry out a stakeholder analysis. And
I think that this will be like, it's also a perfect over, how you say, like going over to the next presentation, but I won't let you go just yet.
We also
I have one more question. Like, do I need you to do this method? So if I would like to do a rapid risk appraisal, can I perform it by myself? And for example, for the charts, do I need like a special software to produce those spider charts? Or can I do this by myself in my region if I'm interested about my like risk management profile?
well, that's another good question. Well, the spider chart is very easy to make thanks to an Excel file, so it's just a matter of entering some numbers. And from more the methodological perspective, well, I didn't carry it out myself in most of the parts because I don't speak German, so somebody else did. So I think it's totally replicable. As it's systematic, thanks to the indicators and questions, all the questions can be repeated in every area. And of course, the results depend on who you select and on the invited experts. But from the moderator point of view, it's not a problem since there are some systematic questions to follow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Silvia, and also for the participants of the conference. Connect to Silvia via the meeting hub or via Eurac Research if you have any further questions about the approach. And as always, look in our exhibition area where you find links to the outputs and on our website as well. And with that, we go to the next presentation. Thanks, Silvia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I have the pleasure now to introduce our project partner, Georg-August-Universität Göttingen, the only partner who's not placed in the Alps, but anyhow, it's a really important. It was a really important partner for us. So Michael Kirchner, he is a research assistant and PhD student at the Department of Forest and Nature Conservation Policy and Forest History at the Georg-August-Universität Göttingen. And this department is really specialized on how to transfer scientific knowledge into practice, to get an awareness from politicians and stakeholders to new and innovative research results. And Michael Kirchner, he has a Bachelor of Science in Forest Science, but he also has a Master in Political and Economic Science. In addition to his research, he also works as a consultant for the State Hunting Association in Thüringen, as a consultant for nature preservation, environmental protection, and game management. And he was the perfect person to be in close contact with practitioners and decision makers in several of our pilot action regions. So we are looking forward to his presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my presentation. My name is Michael Kirchner and I represent the working group of Natural Resource Governance and Knowledge Transfer at the Department of Forest and Nature Conservation Policy at the University of Göttingen. I'm very pleased to share with you our recent research results gained from the GreenRisk4ALPs project. Here we was engaged in Work Package 2 and especially in Work Package 4 to support and to improve the knowledge transfer processes of the project at the science policy interface. Thank you to the GreenRisk4ALPs researchers who hardly worked on the development of the broad set of research products. I only picked out some in the slide on the right side to demonstrate how they might get into praxis. The bad news is that only very few practitioners will make use of the GreenRisk4ALPs research products. This happens quite often within knowledge transfer processes. The good news is that we have multiple opportunities to integrate the results into praxis. These opportunities are raised by the great number of affected actors in the field of natural hazard risk management, represented on the bubbles on the left graphic. All these actors have different interests and therefore they could be involved in various interest conflicts. Actors' compositions and relations might differ from the specific field and task to manage. In this slide I only present an example which could exist in praxis in a certain pilot action region. For the knowledge transfer process, the research results have to be brought in praxis. This means that the scientific part, the scientific truth produced by the GreenRisk4ALPs researchers is part of a practitioner solution, which is represented as the S and the graphic on the left side. Our main assumption is that acting of stakeholders is an interest-driven process. Here, the research products can be integrated into praxis by two different processes. First, convincing actors, which is represented as the triangle, and secondly, due to power processes by forcing actors, which is represented as the stars on the left graphic. In society there exists a nearly unlimited number of micro-power relations, in which one person is able to influence the action of one or more other persons. This is represented by the different sizes of actors in the graphic. but these power relations could change, an example, depending on time or depending on a windows of opportunity or due to structural changes. The described assumptions can be utilized for knowledge transfer tasks. This is captured by the novel RIO model for knowledge transfer. It takes the power relations of actors into account, which will be completed by so-called information channels, where stakeholders communicate to exchange information within the utilization phase. The RIO model conceptualizes a specific process of integration between research and utilization in praxis to facilitate effective knowledge transfer. Integration is the critical step between research and utilization, where successful knowledge transfer is a hypothetical process of different selection steps. Integration is the orientation of research toward practical and/or political problems. This phase is bidirectional, with two main questions: that of the demand practice has for new research contributing to innovative science-based solutions, and that of which research results could be selected according to their relevance in solving practical problems. Activities in integration and research typically alternate between both phases and can be visualized by means of production lines for the process and for the time dimension before a finalized solution is delivered into utilization and before specific science-based action by an actor develop practical relevance. Within integration, actors perceive their typical different roles as researchers, societal, market or governmental actors, each with a corresponding set of interests, values and norms. To a great extent, interests determine all action of individual actors or groups and are defined as an acting orientation, which designates the usefulness for an individual or group that will be obtained from a scientific solution or an object, like a direct object protection forest. Bidirectional selection happens in so-called integration forums. We defined integration forums as places which are formal or informal settings where practitioners and political actors meet in order to exchange science-based information. The bidirectional selection takes place within the integration forum and within the composition of its actors. Therefore, this is mainly a power process by the most powerful actors. Often, several steps of adaptation of the research results are necessary. Integration forums specify entry points to establish practical relevance by addressing actors selectively. This table discriminates between existing, hybrid and new integration forms. We use the truth table format to classify the forms, and for that the point of view of the research project is crucial. An existing form has a link to science and is known by the project, like legally foreseen advisory boards. A hybrid form is a form that might exist and have a link to science, or it might be established but is unknown to the project yet. An example is an ad hoc task force for occurring natural hazard events with major damages. A new form has yet to be established by the project and will develop a link to research by the project. An example, a roundtable or workshop format organized by the project. Here, science has to be added to a group of actors from the fields. By using integration forums for knowledge transfer, a research project can play an active role in selecting actors and by choosing or creating specific forums. A forum might be linked to a single actor or to various actors. In the GreenRisk4ALPs project, the identification of forums built on the pre-analysis, the interest analysis, the conflict analysis, power analysis, and observations in conducted integration forums. This set is used to identify promising stakeholders in regard to the potential to implement ecosystem-based solution for natural hazard risk mitigation and in regard to the project's first research results. An example, the modeling of the protective effect of forests against avalanches in a certain area. Here we are looking from the perspective of science to knowledge transfer. Our aim is to improve the knowledge transfer process from the viewpoint of a research project. Therefore, we want to draw the researchers' attention to stakeholders. This does happen by a sound pre-analysis to analyze actors and actor settings more precise. These 5 steps should be carried out in the planning phase or at latest at the beginning of a research project. The steps are necessary to gain the empirical database for knowledge transfer. In the first step, we aim to investigate the different roles which can actors have within its interest sphere. On the one hand, we have the role of a regulator, who is responsible by mandate for the public task of management, maintenance, restoration and distribution of ecosystem services. On the other hand, we have the role of a user, who is harvesting, using or consuming different ecosystem services. The next step identifies and map affected actors. Step 3 to 5 analyze actors precisely in regard to their interests, conflicts and power. Having this empirical data, we can link specific scientific information with stakeholders inside integration forums. Linking scientific information with stakeholders inside integration forums take place by prioritizing stakeholders for knowledge transfer. Firstly, a coordination process between the interdisciplinary research consortium is needed to select promising actors and to select the relevant research results for these actors. Secondly, we should identify and classify the different types of integration forums in a specific field of work, like natural hazard risk management. Thirdly, we have to lean in appropriate integration forums by trying to seek access to the forum through key actors or through participating actors. All aforementioned steps we summarized in this to-do list for research projects. The more steps you realize, the better the success of implementation of your research projects into praxis. We really hope that the to-do list might help our partners within other research projects or even by implementing the REAR approach and its features within future research proposals. Thanks for your attention. I would also thank the GreenRisk4ALPs Researchers Consortium for their excellent collaboration in the last 3 years. For the BFW team, thank you for organizing this GreenRisk4ALPs Mountain Conference in Innsbruck.
Yeah, I think now we are on stage. Thank you, Michael. I have a question that I think a lot of our attendants also have. Could you give an example from the project of an integration forum that worked well from your in order to transfer our GreenRisk4ALPs results in so that practitioners are aware and might actually use it? And could you also give an example of an integration forum or a setting which didn't work so well, so that other researchers can learn from, and practitioners can learn from these 2 examples of what works, what doesn't work?
So hello from my side here from Innsbruck, and thanks for the invitation to this mountain conference. And thanks for this question, Anna. A good example is from Germany, from the case study in Germany, the pilot action region Oberammergau. There, the GreenRisk4ALPs project was connected to existing integration forum. This is called Mountain Forest Initiative, and this is existing since 2008 in Bavaria. And here the results were connected to by the LWF. This is the departmental research organization from the Bavarian Forest Ministry, and they connected interested actors responsible for the protection forest management, and they get familiar in this integration forum with the research results for the forest function planning. They try to use the models in the future, and they try to use to integrate the existing or developed model from the GreenRisk4ALPs project, especially the flow-by model, to integrate it in the forest function planning in Bavaria. This was from this stage of the project a successful integration form. I hope this process will go on in the future, and maybe we have another project that will be developed further. And you also asked to an integration form that not worked, or that the research results get not into practice. I think this is the normal case, I would say. I will not select a special run from the project, and Michaela showed yesterday and also today this huge table of produced research products. And if you have a deeper look into the details, you will see a lot of products and selected examples of integration from, and then you will see at the right side the integration success. And in most cases this fails, and we only speak about or we only say that the integration has success when a practitioner put a prick of this scientific result and put it into practice and use it in practice. This is a successful integration, and we hope that our products from the project will be part of the praxis, maybe after the end of the project. Now we are on the stage that knowledge transfer normally happened. This is the beginning of knowledge transfer, but this is the bad point of the project. The project will end in 2 months, and normally we need more time to integrate these results.
I think this is a very, very important point, Michael. I think also for us as the natural scientists, we had to learn too that this is a very important process. I think when we met at the beginning of the project, for us it was kind of like, what is that about? And it was also a very important learning process for us, how that integration works, and to realize, yes, just certain things might be utilized in practice, and we have to be very selective in finding the stakeholders who can then push, or who have a need for those outputs, and then can push further. I do think, like, I agree with you that the integration forum in Bavaria was successful. So we continue to work together to utilize our outputs and tools of GreenRisk4ALPs. But I also hope that after this conference, maybe we make more connections and can set up integration forums like in a selective way. So now people learn about the project and the outputs, and maybe then come also to us, and we can sit down together. Yeah, unfortunately, this will go beyond the project, but we also as researchers want that our results are sustainable, that they will be used. So we will also continue working on that process. We have very interesting questions from the panel. So from our online audience. So one is about the ministry, or like this slide you showed with the different actors who have power. And the question is, why is the importance of the ministry you showed so high? And you said like one ministry. And are there several ministries included which could be important, especially in terms of protective forest as a solution for disaster risk reduction?
This is only in one example. The background is always the actors analysis, who's responsible for what, in which case study area we are, and which are the shares of the responsibilities between different ministries. Let's go to Austria and this responsible ministry, and here the competences are combined in different departments. And I think you need a lot of knowledge who is responsible, which department is responsible, and which tasks, goals, and management options the ministry have. And let's think about guidelines. Who's responsible to develop new guidelines? This is very hard to have new ideas, new research results to get into a new guideline, and this is a long time that we need. And one successful case we have not in Austria, but we have it in Slovenia. They developed also new guidelines for forest function planning, and here the ministry and also the Slovenia Forest Service was very interested in these results. And so here we have this connection between the ministry and the forest service. This is part of the ministry, and we have it hopefully in future also in Austria, that the results are part of the guidelines.
Yeah. So I think also Slovenia was a special case because the Slovenia Forest Service was one of the partners on the project. So there was this strong connection established already, which was very important, that like the research results got like one-to-one directly now utilized in practice. So there's another question in the chat which is kind of linked to that. So here the Slovenia Forest Service was a partner of our project and very much involved in all the work. But does the scientist, like, is it always the task of the scientist to know who the stakeholders are, like a priori? So if I plan work, what would be your recommendation how to implement this process into scientific projects and into the work of the scientists?
So to have the idea who are important stakeholders, this is a continuing process, I think. In the beginning of a project, you have this actors analysis, and you map the actors, and during the project you get more familiar with the issue and also with the conflicts, and you learn a lot about the other actors or important actors, and that you didn't notice in the beginning of the project. And also you identified new integration forums, especially the hybrid forums. This is you think that it's important, this forum, but you have no knowledge about the forum. Is it existing or not? But yeah, it's a promising forum, this hybrid, and you think that they have a working group that are responsible for the forest function planning, for instance. And here, this is your integration forum that you have to lean in this moment. And this is what you know during a project, and you have more information about these integration forums during a project which runs 3 years.
So as a scientist, it's probably the best to kind of get together with using my network I hopefully also have with practitioners or policymakers to already start identifying stakeholders and get some information a priori, or work with guys like you together, like political scientists who can help you. Michael, we have to unfortunately stop this discussion here. We are running out of time. We could talk forever. I'm a big fan of your work. For everyone who is interested also to continue the discussion in the Hofburg-Gespräche this afternoon, we will also see a presentation from Max Krott about this topic, and also our colleagues from Eurac will show their results and their approaches a little bit more in depth. And we have more time for discussion, so please join the Hofburg-Gespräche at 3:30 online or live here in Innsbruck in the Congress Center. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Michaela.
Okay, so we are already coming to the last speaker of our conference, and you may know him by now. He was involved in a couple of sessions before. It's Frederic Berger from INRAE, who is our rockfall powerhouse and known as an advocate of mountain forests as protective measure against rockfall. And he has already led several national, French, and international projects on this topic and was also involved in GreenRisk4ALPs. And so he is here talking about the national barriers which may exist for including forest-based solution. We created the word yesterday, forest-based solutions for natural hazard risk management. So let's start this presentation.
Hello. So I've chosen a quite provocative title for my presentation. The question is, are national regulations efficient barriers against forest-based solution and the taking into account of protective forest in regulation about risk prevention? So here are some elements of the context on historical information. So forests are natural component of the landscape. Everybody is agree about that. And also an important point is that the conservation of forest is it's a very whole concern in the Alpine states, and all the forestry acts have the same aim, is to provide restriction of the use rights of the forest in order to restore or to have a sustainable production of forest stands. When the forests are offering this kind of natural protection or protective effect, then the question of the management of this forest and taking into account in the different risk prevention policies is coming up. What is quite interesting is that this protective effect is in fact the base of all the natural risk prevention protection policies in the Alpine space. It is known from centuries, this protective effect, but there is a real risk of forgetting. So for example, from historical data in France, we can find information about the protective forest since the end of the 15th century. For example, here is a big catastrophic event that occurred near Grenoble, and in this document you can find some information about the effect of the forest. Another example, this is in a church, an ex voto, and by the end of the 17th century. And here, what is nice, this is an ex voto dealing about snow avalanches, but on the painting you can see that forest is represented. So it means that the effect of the forest in terms of protection is taken into account in this document. And the base of all the risk prevention policies or on regulation in the Alpine area is coming from the mid 19th century with the big flooding event that occurred at this period. And in France, in 1856, we have this big event with a lot of damage. And also in 1860 we get big first snow avalanche damage, and it was to a military hospital in the Pyrenees, and then the state has decided to develop an efficient land use planning in order to avoid such situation and also to pay for protection control measure. So it has been done by Napoleon III, and he created this specific service of the Forest Office, which is the French Torrent and Avalanche Control Service, called in French Restauration des terrains en montagne. And the objective was to first develop the land use planning policy in terms of how to use forest as an efficient tools for mitigation on natural risk. And the first action of this forester were to do reforestation. Here is the example of the Montagne de Séuse in the south part of France, how it was looking like at the end of the 19th century, and now it's looking like that. And everybody are considering that these forests are natural. So I was talking about the forgetting risk. Here is a nice example, because for the people there is no more natural risk on this mountain, which is not the case, because if the forest will disappear, if there is any mistake in the forest management, then you can reactivate the different phenomena on this. In association with this reforestation activity, they have also developed the first mapping of natural risk or hazard in France. For example, this is the example for the snow avalanches. They have developed the mapping since the beginning of the 20th century. And if you have the different snow avalanche paths that are mapped, you have also information about the activity of these different paths. This is very important for scientists because here we have a wonderful database in order to understand two things. First, the activity of this kind of hazard, but also the effect of climate change, because we have more than 1 century of information, so we can, if we mixed with the meteorological data, we can have a good overview on the climate change impact on this phenomena. As I said, this French forestry regulation has been used as a basis in many alpine countries, Italy, Switzerland, Austria, and so on, for developing their own, let's say, torrent and avalanche control regulation and services. All these services, they have the same object or the same aim, is to avoid risk consequences by developing protective structure, protective works, but also by making this land use planning. The question is where something could happen and what could be the potential damage. And if we can avoid to have stakes in this area, then it will be great. So the main basis is the land use planning, and then also we want to avoid certain let's say, practices in the forestry world. For example, like this one.
Putain de merde. Oh. Je crois qu'on peut descendre la route déblayée.
So here in such case, you just get the opposite effect that you were looking for. So this timber has generate a rockfall that could also generate some damage. So within the GreenRisk4ALPs project, we are making a comparison about the different policy and regulation in the alpine space. So here are the first results for 4 of the 6 alpine countries. There are some differences for sure about definition of protective and/or protection forest, because the two terms are used. There are differences in the regulation and the way of financing. So what is very important here is to see, and this is the last item, is that in natural risk prevention document, this protective effect of forest ecosystem services are not always taken into account. So here we have to push on this. If we want to develop real efficient forestry based solution management, we need to have this integration in the different regulation and risk prevention document. Just to give you an overview about the limits that we can find, this is coming from France. For example, the protection forest classification in France is not really promoted because the process to get your forest classified as a protection forest or protective forest is too complicated and too long. Everything is managed by Paris, so it's not very well used for, let's say, a private owner. It has been well used for public forest because it's quite simple. Paris is working with Paris, let's say like that. But for private owner, it's much more complicated. And the main problem is that the financial compensation are only possible if your forest is classified as a protective forest. Also in France, we have many legislative codes, and there are too many and different possibilities to integrate forest for their protective effect in the different codes. There is the forestry codes, there is the land use codes, there is the environmental codes, and so on and so on and so on. And sometimes they can propose opposite solution. And the last point, which is very important, so in France we have what's called the state's doctrine. It's not allowed to integrate the forest effect since the hazard mapping and zoning. You can only take it into account on the risk zoning. It means that we are making mapping with the maximal potential runout zone and damage that can occur hazard without taking into account the forest, and then you are only taking into account this protective effect on the risk zoning. So it's a kind of mitigation of this map. The main problem is that it depends on the expert who is providing this map, because if the expert is not coming from the forestry background, then forest will not be taken into account, and this is a very big problem. And by the end, we are looking for responsibilities in the French codes. It means that in case of rockfall, the rocks is belonging to someone. So it means that the damage is also belonging to someone, and then the owner of the rocks should pay for or compensate the damage. In all the country, you can find also guidelines. They are existing since decades for the forest management and specifically dedicated to the protective effect, but they are not always updated with the last scientific knowledge, and also the feedbacks of the forester are not always taken into account in this document. For example, in France, the document has been established in 2006, and there were no updating since this date, and a lot of knowledge has been improved, is now easily accessible for forester and practitioner, but it's not integrated in such documents. So, what we can say as a conclusion: some national regulation, they are not really in equation with the societal needs about nature-based solution and forestry-based solution for risk mitigation. So we have to adapt them. There is a lack of a real risk on forest culture. For example, the public is considering that the forest grows by itself and there is no need for forester. If you remember the picture that I show you on Seus Mountain, if you are not making the management of this forest, then you can encounter big problems and catastrophic condition. So we need to have still forester and to manage the forest in the good way. We need of more participative action in the management, in the decision making. That's very important. All the stakeholders should participated, because one of the questions is against what people want to be protected, and then we can develop an efficient strategy in consideration. And the last point is how to harmonize. So we have different possibility. Interreg Alpine Space program is a very good option. USALP also, so the European strategy for the Alpine region, it's a very good possibility also. The Alpine Convention is also here for helping us to promote this wheel of harmonization, and we can also add other structure like the International Union of Conservation of the Nature. About European solution, we need adapted mountain forest management and regulation. So what about a European forest-based policy for risk prevention? And we should develop this on a European scale, and not only for Alpine space, but for all the mountain of the European space. And we need to share knowledge, data, model, success and non-success stories. That's very important. And here it should be the opportunity for developing new projects about this sharing of knowledge, but of course, and maybe the first need is to share the data. GreenRisk4ALPs is a good example. The project Rock the Alps has been also a success story in this way. So we have to do it for snow avalanches, for landslide, for erosion. So now it's the time of sharing the data and to develop common modeling action. The time where everybody was working on his own model on his own side is over for me. So take this into account, and if you want to push on this direction, please contact me. I have a lot of ideas for new projects. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fred, for this presentation, which was very interesting and also touched, I think, a lot of topics we discussed yesterday in the panel discussion. And also the question, like, how do we integrate our research results? Because, I mean, research or scientific knowledge should be like a basis then for guidelines and so on. Like you said, that often guidelines are not up to date anymore, considering the current research results. But we both were just talking that we still, for us, it's still a big questions like about harmonizing guidelines. I mean, we also had in GreenRisk4ALPs that goal at the beginning to kind of come up with or develop a harmonized, like risk-based forest management, protected forest management guideline. But it's actually also very influenced by the national legislations, right? So what would be your recommendation, or how do you think we could harmonize guidelines? Is that even needed, or do they should be like done to the specific national legislations and regulations? And also for us, when you say, yeah, we make guidelines as the scientists, but then they don't get used. So we would really like to hear your take on that, how you think that could be accomplished, and is it needed, and why so urgently? Thanks.
So thanks for the question. Big one. I think that this is a project in itself.
But that's an answer already. It's a project itself, but
I think that what we can harmonize are the concepts, the tools, or the methodology, and then after, as you said, the borderline is fixed by the national regulation. So if we are able to harmonize the definition, the concept that we want to push, and the methodology, for example, how to maps protective forest as has been done in GreenRisk. Okay, bingo. And then we will use this and adapt to the national regulation. Because on the national regulation, it could be said that, okay, this is this kind of model to be used. We have also some regional specificity. We are all facing climate change, but not on the same way due to the regional conditions. So we have to adapt to this. I will not propose to, for example, my Slovenian colleagues, what we are making in the north part of France as the basis. No, we have to adapt in consequences to take into account their local climate condition and the climate change in their condition. Maybe I know that they have a lot of problem with bark beetles, which is not so huge in France. So then we have to adapt. We have to take this in consideration. But if we can have this kind of guidelines that can be used as a red line for the concept, for the methodology, then bingo, we will have it. And maybe it will be more easy for the European policy makers to use this to say, okay, for a regulation, we will take into account specificity for each country or each region, but we will work on the same way. What is a protective forest is this, and everybody will use the same definition. And what we need, and you're right, that we are developing knowledge. And I have to say that I really liked yesterday Peter Meyer when he said that BFW is a research-based center. This is exactly what we have to develop with our colleague from the field, with the forester, how to develop a real research on proof-based knowledge that they can use in an easy way. And here, if we have success in that, it means that the guidelines, they will be well understood. That's the first point. And then we will have these feedbacks, because I can tell you that in sometimes the forester said, oh, a new guideline. It will be nice in my library. I will never open it, even it's still under this plastic bag, and that's it. But we have no feedbacks. They never open it. So it means that what is also very important is that if we are making this, we have to do this with them. They have to appropriate this document, and we have to do training session. And here, the forester is one of the stakeholders of the forest, in the way that also the scientist is one of the stakeholders. We should talk on the same level. I have a part of the knowledge, you have a practical knowledge, how to exchange. And I think that the main word is communication.
Yeah, and I think I would like to add to this. We are unfortunately running out of time, so and no more questions. But I would like to add to this that it's not just like, or that the communication needs to start before we come up with our plans to make up or to come up with new guidelines. So the communication really needs to start prior to that. I know you are, for example, very active also on the European level, but I think this needs also a lot of time that you then can really define what is the goal of your guidelines, because everyone, like I said, also understands something different about it. Is it like how I manage my forest? Or no, it's about harmonizing definitions, concepts, and methodology, which then gets adapted in the national or according to the national regulations, so that there are not a barrier for nature-based, forest-based solutions.
And this is what Georg yesterday called the trust building. We have to work on it. That's very important.
Yeah, that's I think a process never ends. Also, new people come and go in a research institution, and you always have to work on that, and it's important. And I think also for us as scientists, it's very important. Yeah. Thank you very much, Fred. Or would you like to add something, Anna?
No, I think that was a very nice summary of it, that we need to know better the needs of policymakers.
Yeah.
At the right before the beginning of writing proposals, we need to know what are their needs.
Yeah, and maybe for this,
include them these needs into
Yeah.
designing projects. And I think that perfectly leads over to a few more slides I would like to share at the end of the session. So thank you very much, Fred.
Thanks
for being here. So do we see ours? What is going on? Here we go. We still haven't figured it out, but yes. Now we will. So I think that was a perfect ending of the session, and I hope you enjoyed seeing what GreenRisk4ALPs is about, and like all the interesting results and methods and tools the scientists developed within this project, or we developed actually together also through our integration process with the practitioners. At the end, I just really would like to encourage you to go to our homepage to look deeper into decision support tools, the publications, reports. There are video summaries, like that great video from our Eurac colleagues, which really summarizes the work they did, and then you can dig deeper into the outcomes. There'll also be a virtual conference proceedings, so you can re-watch the discussions and the conference and all the talks on our website, probably coming in July at some point. So please visit our website often to get new input. And also what's coming soon, there will be a video in German for information for forest owners. It's called like, Is My Forest Protection Forest? And it also summarizes the outputs of our work package 2, which was on network analysis. Then also come in 2 books on alpine forests as EcoDRR. The next session, Yuri Begos will present one of them, and also in the session after the lunch break, there will be experts from other institutions or outside the GreenRisk4ALPs project who contributed to our second book, will present their work, and we are really happy that they are here. And also that roadmap for multiple actor and decision-targeted information processes, Michael Kirchner was talking about briefly, like this checklist. We will work on a format that it is also available for you to use it easily. And this will come up soon and also be published on our website. For me, one big take-home message, I think I said that often, we also said it here, Rio is key. So if we want that our research is getting utilized in practice, we need to work on this integration process. It needs to be selective, so we need to select our practitioners so that it's then getting utilized. So I think I said it often already during the conference. I say it one more time again, integration must start at the proposal stage for research results to be utilized in practice. What's next to prepare for the future natural hazard risk? I think this came also out of this session. We need to develop dynamic risk-based approaches to react to the rapid changes caused, for example, by natural disturbances, but also by building new infrastructure. And to strengthen our natural hazard protective forest and economic models, we need to continue collaborations between scientists and with the policy and practice, and this in an iterative way. So to customize these risk-based approaches for the needs of the identified users, we really need to work not only interdisciplinary, so not only in science between the different disciplines, but also transdisciplinary together with fields from the practice and policy. Yesterday we asked a couple poll questions. We are way behind, so we do it quick. we were asking yesterday why were people participating, and it showed that many of you are here because they are researchers and they're interested in the research of forests and natural hazards, and also in management practices. So I think we do have a good mix of practitioners and scientists here in the audience, which is great because this was also meaning of this conference, to bring those people to bring you together. And also then we ask if you need funding as a private forest owner for protected forest services. I think we just had a couple forest owners on here, but it looks like that everyone kind of know what, or like know that yes, they need funding, but half they know where to get that funding and where not. So maybe like information about that need to be a little bit more transparent and easy to find. I really also think that they work on that. The BMLRT, the ministry, they just they have this great website, schutzwald.at, now also available in English, protective/forest.at, where you can find a lot of information. These are great websites, and they can probably also direct you to that kind of information. And then lastly, which payment mechanism do you think is adequate for private forest owners to help supporting protected forests? And here, the national funding with a very transparent selection process is what people seek for. But I'm also, it's interesting that the crowdfunding option, that was also what Fred Berger yesterday suggested in his in our panel discussion, according to a different topic, really picked up that this could maybe also be something in the future, especially now in our digital age, where a lot of things are bought and given through through computers. So with that, I would like to thank again all the people who worked on the project. We heard a lot of great presentations. We will hear more now. Yuri Begos and Paolo Perret will take over to show you more about one of our outputs, our book. And also this afternoon, please join the Hofburggespräche at 3:30 online or at the conference center. And don't forget the session after the lunch break. I think it will be very, very interesting to also look outside of the GreenRisk4ALPs project. So with that,
we have 5 minutes break now.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna hear all about some really nice best practice examples from our pilot action regions.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I'm sorry, we are running a little bit behind, but I think we need 5 minutes so everyone can stretch their legs. So we'll be back at 11:45. Sorry for the delay. Very sorry. Bye-bye.
Bye.